I never used to be afraid of my backyard. It was just a normal backyard behind a normal house in Ohio. A wooden privacy fence, a patchy lawn, an old fire pit made of cheap stones from Home Depot, and a line of pine trees beyond the back fence that separated our neighborhood from a narrow strip of unused land. Nothing about it felt strange. During the day, it looked boring, if anything. At night, though, it was different, not in a dramatic way at first. Just quiet to quiet, sometimes. This happened in the fall of 2022. About 3 months after I moved into the house alone. It was my first place after my divorce. And I'd wanted somewhere small, somewhere private, somewhere no one would bother me. The house was perfect for that. It sat at the very end of a cul-de-sac, and my backyard backed up to a dark tree line that nobody ever went near. The first weird thing happened on a Wednesday night. I remember because I was outside around 10:30, sitting by the fire pit with a beer, scrolling on my phone, trying not to think about my life falling apart. It was cold enough to see my breath. The yard was dark, except for the yellow glow from the back porch light and the faint orange coals in the pit. That's when I noticed a light moving beyond the fence. Not above it, beyond. Italiano. At first, I thought it was just a flashlight in the woods. Maybe a teenager cutting through the strip behind the houses, but it moved strangely. Slow, controlled. It didn't bounce the way a flashlight normally does when someone walks. It floated in a straight line, about chest height, moving from left to right behind the fence slats. Then it stopped. I remember staring at the fence, waiting to hear footsteps or voices, but there was nothing. No crunching leaves. No talking, just that pale white light holding completely still on the other side. I called out, "Hello." No answer. The light shut off instantly. That bothered me more than if it had moved away. I stayed outside maybe another 30 seconds. Then went back in, locked the sliding door, and checked the backyard camera feed on my phone. I had one cheap Wi-Fi cam mounted under the porch awning. The angle covered most of the yard, but not the narrow strip behind the fence. There was nothing unusual in the footage, just me sitting by the fire and then standing there like an idiot staring at the fence. The next night, the light came back. Same time, around 10:30. This time I was inside washing dishes when I happened to glance out the kitchen window. There it was again, drifting slowly behind the fence. Same cold white color, same unnatural steadiness. I turned off the kitchen light and stood still. The light stopped. I don't know why, but this time I had the horrible feeling that it hadn't just stopped moving. It had noticed me noticing it. I grabbed the flashlight from the junk drawer and stepped onto the back porch. The yard was icy cold. The grass looked silver in the moonlight. I walked to the fence and shined my flashlight through the cracks. Nothing. No person. No path. No animal. Just darkness and the uneven line of trees maybe 15 feet past the fence. Then, from somewhere directly to my right, just beyond the fence, I heard a man whisper, "Don't use that light." I jumped so hard, I nearly dropped the flashlight. I backed away instantly and ran inside, locked the door, and called the police. They came 20 minutes later, shined their lights along the strip behind the fence, and found nothing. No footprints, no trespasser, nothing. One of the officers actually smiled and asked if maybe I'd heard a neighbor, but I knew exactly where that whisper had come from. It had been right there, maybe 3 feet away from me, separated only by the fence. After that, I stopped going into the backyard at night. For almost a week, everything was quiet. No lights, no whispers, no movement. I started telling myself it had probably been some homeless guy passing through, maybe someone high, maybe just some creep who got off on scaring people. Then Saturday came. I had friends over that evening for the first time since moving in. We grilled burgers, watched a game, drank too much, and by midnight, everyone was gone. I locked up and went upstairs to bed. At 2:14 in the morning, my backyard camera sent a motion alert. I checked the app half asleep, expecting to see a raccoon or a branch moving. Instead, I saw my backyard illuminated by my porch light and my back gate standing open. I knew I had locked that gate earlier. I sat up in bed and opened the live feed. At first, I didn't see anyone. The yard looked empty. Then the camera adjusted slightly to movement near the fence line, and I saw him. A man was standing perfectly still in the far back corner of my yard, not beyond the fence. Inside it, he was tall and thin, wearing a dark jacket and what looked like a baseball cap. His face was mostly hidden, but I could see one thing clearly. He was holding a flashlight at his side, not tornado, just holding it. And he was looking directly at the house. I called 911 immediately and stayed on the line while watching the live feed. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay upstairs. Locked-in officers were on the way. The man didn't move for almost a full minute. Then, very slowly, he raised his flashlight and clicked it on. But he didn't point it at the house. He pointed it down at the ground in front of him. That's when I saw there was something already there. A shape. A long wooden object lying in the grass. He bent down, picked it up, and lifted it into the porch light enough for me to recognize it. It was one of the slats from my fence. He had removed it from the inside, meaning he hadn't climbed over. He'd been entering and leaving through the fence whenever he wanted. By the time police arrived, he was gone. They found the broken fence panel, footprints in the flower bed, and something else that made me feel physically sick. On the outside of the fence, hidden behind a row of shrubs, they found a little camping stool. Whoever he was, he had been sitting out there, watching my yard, watching my house. Maybe 4 days, maybe longer. I sold the place 6 months later, but the part I still think about isn't the light, or the whisper, or even seeing him in the yard. It's what one of the officers told me before he left. He said, "You're lucky you checked the camera when you did." Primera asked why. He looked back at the yard and said, because if he was already inside the fence and still hadn't come to the house, he was probably waiting for you to come outside first. And ever since then, I don't care how peaceful a backyard looks in daylight. At night, a fence doesn't feel like protection anymore. It feels like a blindfold. When I was 12, my parents rented a house in rural Missouri for one summer, while my dad worked on a bridge project nearby. It was the kind of place that looked fine from the road, but the longer you stayed there, the more wrong it felt. The house sat on 2 acres, surrounded by dry grass and thin woods. There was an old tool shed leaning to one side, a rusted clothesline pole, and in the back corner of the yard, under a dying maple tree, there was a wooden swing set that looked older than I was. It had 2 chain swings and 1 little glider bench with faded red paint peeling off it in strips. The first day we got there, the owner told my parents, almost jokingly, if the swing moves by itself at night, don't worry about it. Wind gets strange out here. That would have been fine if there had actually been wind out there. There usually wasn't. Most nights, the air was dead still. My bedroom faced the backyard. The swing set stood maybe 30 yards from the house, just far enough that at night it sat in a blurry patch between the yard and the tree line. You could see it clearly under the moonlight, but not every detail. Just the outline, the hanging chains. The bench. The first week, nothing happened. Then one night, I woke up around 1 o'clock a.m. because of a squeaking noise. Slow, rhythmic. I sat up and listened. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. I went to the window and looked out. One of the swings was moving, not high, just slightly, but enough that the chain caught moonlight every few seconds. There was no wind. The tree branches weren't moving. The grass wasn't moving. Just that swing. I stared at it for maybe a minute before going back to bed. Primera is scared, but he also didn't want to act like a baby and wake my parents over an old swing. The next night, it happened again. This time, both swings were moving, one forward, one back, like someone had stood up and stepped away from them seconds earlier. I told my mom the next morning, and she laughed it off. She said old yards settle, temperatures change, animals bump into things. My dad barely looked up from his coffee. So that night, I decided to prove it. He took my mom's digital camera, the kind that stamped the date in the corner, and set it on the windowsill, pointed toward the swing set. I left it recording before bed. At around 12:40 a.m., the squeaking woke me again. I didn't even go to the window right away. I reached for the camera first and checked the screen. The swing set was there in the night-visioned grain, blurry but visible. Both swings were moving, and something was sitting on the glider bench. At first, I thought it was one of my parents, just a dark shape facing away from the house. But it was too small, too low, and it wasn't moving with the bench. The bench rocked gently. The shape did not. I slowly raised my eyes and looked through the actual window. The bench was empty. I looked back at the camera screen. The shape was still there. That was the first moment in my life I ever felt that cold, electric kind of fear where your whole body tells you not to make a sound. I put the camera down and got into my parents' room as fast as I could. My dad got annoyed until he saw my face. Then he followed me back to the window. By the time we looked outside, the swings had stopped. The bench was still. Nothing was there. The camera footage, though, was worse than I remembered. The shape on the bench looked almost like a child sitting with both hands in its lap. Completely dark, featureless, small. And when my dad rewound it, he noticed something else. At one point, one of the swings moved forward far enough that it should have passed right through the shape. But on camera, it went behind it, as if something solid was really sitting there. My dad didn't say much after that. The next day, he walked out to the swing set in broad daylight and checked the ground around it. That's when he noticed the fresh dirt. Not everywhere. Just directly beneath the glider bench. A patch about 3 feet long that looked slightly sunken compared to the rest of the yard. He got a shovel from the shed and started digging. I remember my mom yelling at him to stop because it wasn't our property, but he kept going. A few inches down, the dirt changed color. Darker, damp. Then his shovel hit something soft but resistant. He stopped. Then he dug more carefully. I was standing on the patio when he uncovered the edge of a tiny shoe. Not a toy shoe. A real one. Child-sized. My mother screamed the second she saw it. Police came within the hour. They taped off the whole backyard and made us stay inside. By sunset, the swing set was surrounded by patrol cars and floodlights. An officer came in and asked my parents a lot of questions, but I only caught parts of it. The remains under the bench were human, small, old enough that they'd probably been there for years. After that, everything moved fast. We were told to leave the house the next morning. Later, my parents learned that the owner's granddaughter had disappeared nearly a decade earlier while visiting that property. She was 5 years old. The case had gone cold. Nobody ever searched under the swing set. The owner was arrested 2 weeks later, trying to leave the state. What still bothers me most is what happened the last night before we left. We were all sleeping in the living room with the lights on because my mother refused to let anyone sleep alone. Around 3 a.m., I woke up and looked toward the back window. The swing set was visible in the yard. The police tape was still there, lit by the porch light. And even with the bench removed and the ground dug up beneath it, one of the chain swings was moving. Slowly. Back and forth. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. Like something was still trying to be noticed. I never told my parents I saw it. I think they'd already had enough. But every now and then I still think about that camera screen, about seeing something that the naked eye couldn't see, and about the way it sat there so calmly above the place where it had been hidden, as if it had been waiting all those years for somebody in that house to finally look out the window at the right time. A few years ago, I rented a small house outside Phoenix while I was finishing paramedic school. It wasn't a bad neighborhood. Just one of those newer developments where every backyard looks the same. Block walls instead of wood fences. Gravel landscaping. A tiny patch of artificial grass. And a sliding glass door that made you feel way too exposed at night. I lived alone, and because of my schedule, I was usually getting home after midnight. That's probably why I noticed it before anyone else would have. The ladder. The first time I saw it, it was leaning against the far back wall of my yard. Not my ladder, not even close. It was an old aluminum extension ladder, tall enough to reach the top of the wall and probably a little beyond. I saw it at 1:20 in the morning when I let my dog out before bed. 1 second the yard looked normal, and the next I froze because there was suddenly a 6-foot silhouette where there shouldn't have been one. I turned on the yard light and just stared at it. My first thought was that one of the neighbors had tossed it over by mistake, or maybe a worker had left it there during construction nearby. But that made no sense. It was inside my yard, propped neatly against the wall, almost centered. Too deliberate. I dragged it away from the wall, laid it flat, and went inside. The next morning, I checked all around the yard. No damage, no missing property, nothing disturbed. So I hauled the ladder to the side gate and left it outside the front yard with a cardboard sign that said, "Not mine." By the time I got home that evening, it was gone. Problem solved. Except it came back 3 nights later. Same place, same wall. This time, I got angry. I knocked on both my back neighbors' doors the next day, but neither of them recognized it. One older guy actually got weirdly serious when I mentioned it and said, "Don't leave things by the back wall. People test houses that way." I asked what he meant, and he shrugged, like he regretted saying it. That night, I moved a chair to the sliding glass door and watched the yard with the lights off inside. My dog lay beside me, ears twitching every few minutes. At 2:07 a.m., she lifted her head and gave a low growl. Not toward the house, toward the back wall. I couldn't see anything at first, just the pale rectangle of moonlight over the gravel. Then a hand appeared on top of the block wall. A human hand. It gripped the edge, fingers slowly curling over the concrete. Then another hand appeared. A head started to rise between them. I don't think I breathed for those few seconds. The person climbing was taking their time, carefully, quietly. Whoever it was had done this before. I grabbed my phone and crouched lower behind the chair. The head lifted just enough for me to see a forehead, eyes, and the top half of a face in the moonlight. A man? Not a teenager. Not a kid messing around. An adult man, scanning my backyard. My dog barked once loud. Explosive, violent, and the man dropped instantly out of sight. I heard the scrape of shoes on the wall, and then running on the other side. Police came, took a report, and basically told me what I already knew. Somebody had been using the ladder to get a look into my yard, maybe planning a burglary. What they didn't explain was why he kept putting the ladder back inside the yard. That answer came a week later. I had just gotten home from a 12-hour shift and was too tired to eat. I let the dog out, checked the locks, and collapsed on the couch. Sometime after 3 a.m., I woke up because the dog was standing stiff in the hallway, not barking, just staring toward the sliding door. The backyard light was off, but enough moonlight came in for me to see the ladder. It was back again, only now it wasn't leaning against the back wall. It was leaning against the house. Against the roofline just outside my bedroom window. I can't describe the feeling that went through me when I realized what that meant. This wasn't somebody trying to get into the yard. This was somebody trying to get into the house quietly, from above, where I wouldn't hear the glass door or the locks. I called 911 and whispered my address. The dispatcher told me officers were already nearby and to stay hidden. While I was on the phone, I heard it. A soft metallic creak above me. Then another. Weight on the ladder. Someone was on it. My bedroom window was on the second floor bump out above the patio roof, and from the couch, I could just barely see the edge of that roof line through the glass. I remember staring at it, waiting for a face to appear at the corner. Instead, I saw a shadow move across the stucco near the window. Then, fingers, 4 fingers curled slowly over the edge of the roof. The dispatcher kept asking if I could see the intruder, but I couldn't answer. I was locked on those fingers. They were dirty, slow, confident. Then red and blue lights flashed across the room. I heard shouting outside, then the crash of someone losing balance, then a thud so hard my dog yelped. They caught him in the alley, behind the house, with a broken wrist and burglary tools in his backpack. The detective told me later the man had done this before in 2 nearby neighborhoods. He would place ladders inside backyards days in advance to see which homeowners noticed, which ones removed them, which ones ignored them, and which homes had dogs. He called it mapping behavior. In other words, the ladder wasn't just a tool. It was a test. What still bothers me is the timing. The detective believed the guy had been watching my schedule long enough to know when I came home late and when I went straight to sleep. He probably knew exactly which room was mine. I moved out 2 months later. But sometimes, even now, if I wake up in the middle of the night, I picture those fingers rising over the roofline, slow and patient, like they had every right to be there. And I think about how close I came to sleeping through it, because the scariest part of backyard horror isn't what you see in the yard. It's realizing the yard was never the target. It was just the way in.